Okay, so when the recording comes on, that's my cue usually to start. So we will get started as people are still coming in. So hello everyone, Megan Tuttle, president for NEA New Hampshire. If you didn't hear earlier, I'm so excited. I'm seeing lots of familiar faces and names and some new ones. So this is great. There's Lisa. Where's my dog, Lisa? I was waiting for you to come on. Mine's outside right now. She'll be in a little while, I'm sure, barking. So we are on, I don't even know what number of the Tuttle Talks, but they have exploded. I'm so excited. I'm hoping to relieve some of the nervousness that's going around the state, lessen some of the anxiety. I had a checkup last week at my doctor's office, and he said, so how are things going? And I was like, well, I'm a little bit stressed right now. He was like, no, everybody's got a little bit of stress, a little bit of low-level depression. I was like, no, I don't think you understand what really is going on. And then I kind of explained. He was like, okay, yeah, so maybe we should get a blood pressure cuff at home just to monitor things, and we'll kind of excuse the readings right now. And I was like, I don't know if that, is good or not, but so before we start, I want to say thank you to everybody for everything that you've done this summer, this past school year. I know that there's been a lot in the papers lately about how educators are just, ridiculous for not wanting to go back and just go do their job and this and that. And there's so much more to it. And I know you know that. So you don't hear it enough. Thank you for everything you're doing. The fears you have are real. The anxiety that you have is real. The butterflies in your stomach, the nervousness, it's all real. And we need to make sure that people truly understand where educators are coming from, that we want to be back in the classroom, not always possible. And the nervousness and the, pressure that some of you are feeling going back one-to-one soon is even worse. I was sitting on the Concord School District marathon meeting the other night. I got off at 10:30, and after I got off, they decided to go remote instead of hybrid, and I was shocked because the interim superintendent wanted hybrid and the instructional committee that met wanted hybrid, and then the board basically just said no, it's not safe enough. And so there seems to be a lot of flip-flopping. It's pretty intense up there right now. So thank you for everything you're doing for yourself and for the kids. You definitely don't hear it enough. Just a couple quick things before we start. We do have state committees that we're always looking for members. I think I mentioned it last week, but if you're interested in being on any of the state committees, please let me know. We have things like GR, Government Relations. We have our membership committee. We have, God, I can't even think anymore what the other committees are. We have HCR, our Human Civil Rights Committee, and a bunch of others. So if you're interested in any state committee, please let me know. I'll put my email in the chat box again, and my phone number. You can call, text, or email me, and we'll go through that. Some of them, are year-long. Some of them are ad hoc, things like that. The other thing I was talking with, I think I had a leadership call the other day, and we were talking about things you could do at the beginning of the year. And since we have so many leaders that show up in this call, and really, if you're an educator in the state, you're a leader to me. We thought it'd be a good idea to host kind of a get to know your contract at the beginning of the school year, or what's in that MOU that got signed. We know they have to go by everybody to get voted on, but what really are they saying? So that might be something you want to do. Take a Friday morning or a Wednesday afternoon. We can get a Zoom call for you connected, and that just might be good for those people that really aren't sure what's in that MOU and really go through the specifics of it. So if you're interested in that, we can hook you up with your UniServe director, and we can get that going. So that might be a good idea. This year is going to be so different from so many years in so many ways. So thank you, George, for putting that up. And so I think we will get started. So when we first started this whole journey back in June, I think one of our first guests was Jane Bergeron. I'm not going to even say your second one because I never say it right. I'm just going to say Jane Bergeron. She's the executive director of the New Hampshire Special Education Administrators Association. And at the time, the issue was what's going on with special ed in the state with remote learning then, right? It hasn't changed. The governor came out with an executive order. Oh, and this is being recorded. Sorry. Can't remember if I said that. The executive order came out, I think it was 38, 42, 45. I can't even keep track anymore of what the number was. And basically it said that within 30 days of school opening, the IEP teams had to have a meeting to assess where the kids were at. That was within 30 days of school opening. We knew that meetings weren't being able to happen the way they should have in the spring, let alone we didn't even know what was going to happen now. And so Jane and her group and the group that we work with immediately got on this and, you know, basically said, this is ridiculous. This can't happen. This is not realistic. And so we signed on to a letter that Jane and her group wrote with the Superintendent's Association, with the School Board Association, and the Principals Association, and basically are asking the governor to change this or to clarify some things. So I'm going to turn it over to Jane to explain a little bit about what's going on. We'll open up the chat box for some questions in a little bit, and I'll kind of moderate those with Jane. She is the expert here on special ed. She's such an advocate for special ed teachers, for all educators really, and for special ed in New Hampshire, and just is such a wealth of information. So I'm really happy that we have her on with us again. And so I'll moderate some of the questions. And I did get some questions earlier, and I did send those over to Jane, so she knows if you sent me in some questions or sent them to George, we did get those over to Jane earlier. So she did have a little bit of a preview on what was going on. And as always, if it's a specific question that we can't get answered here, we will let your UniServe director know, and we will get an answer back to you. So I'm going to turn it over to Jane. Thank you so much. I hope I got that right, because there's so many nuances to all the executive orders. I can never keep track of it. So there you go. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you. And thank you all of you for participating this evening. It's great to actually see some familiar faces. I know several of you, including one of my neighbors down the street, Margaret Parent. Oh, wave to Margaret. And I hope all of you are healthy and that your families are doing well. As Megan mentioned, this is an extremely stressful time for educators, and even more so for our folks who are working with kids with disabilities. So just want to put that out front, that we recognize that, we support you, we know you're the boots on the ground, and our Association of Special Ed Administrators is here to support all of you. We also know that, you know, our kids with disabilities are general ed kids first, and, you know, special ed is just a small part of a much larger system. So Megan mentioned Executive Order number 48 from the governor, which came out, I believe, maybe in May. I don't have the date right in front of me. Our professional associations, the superintendents, school boards associations, NEA, our principals recognized right away that the second paragraph had some real challenges for us when it came to kids with disabilities. Specifically, the order indicated that all kids with IEPs would have to be evaluated within the first 30 days of opening school. And the purpose of those meetings would be to determine whether or not compensatory education services were needed for the student. That raised so many questions on so many levels, but first and foremost, one of the biggest concerns for us was the realistic expectation of, number one, taking staff away from kids after they've been out of school since March. The amount of time it would take to conduct those evaluations, the validity of such evaluations, knowing that kids have been, you know, through a lot of trauma over the past few months, and whether or not any results that we could get would even be valuable in terms of measuring progress or loss of learning. We also questioned the definition of compensatory education, and got our attorneys involved in it. And we've had ongoing conversations with the department. We've had attorneys meet with the department. We've asked them for further clarification, at which we have had no success. And so we, as professional associations, did craft a letter working with some of our special ed attorneys in the state. And we crafted that letter to the governor and to the Commissioner of Education, asking for a few things, asking for some flexibility around the 30-day requirement. We recognize and realize the importance of assessing kids coming back, but we need adequate time to do that, not just for kids with disabilities, but for all kids. We want to know where they're at, but we need the time, and we need to do that when the kids and the families are ready for it, not because we have a 30-day timeline. So that letter actually was finalized today and went out to the governor and the commissioner this evening, and a copy of that was sent to Megan, who I'm sure will share with all of the members soon. We'll send it out to our members tomorrow morning. So we have been spending a lot of time looking at that issue and working collaboratively with all the partners to try to address that challenge. One of many that all of us are facing, but that's been kind of on the front burner for the past couple weeks. As many of you might know, the commissioner and our Bureau of Special Education administrator have provided verbal guidance to us that we don't have to adhere to the governor's 30-day notice. And the Department of Ed has given us till November 15th to conduct those evaluations. However, our understanding is that the Commissioner of Education cannot override a governor's order. Therefore, we are seeking official notice from someone to say there is some flexibility and some opportunity to do this in an authentic and genuine way. So Megan, does that help to kind of set the stage for the executive order?
You caught me as I was eating a Frito. Sorry, it's dinner. Yeah. And there is still so many, I think, concerns and questions over, you know, what does that really mean? If we're doing remote, how's that going to work? Is that still in effect? I'm just going back to get some of the questions that came in. If I can pull up my other screen. There's been some questions too. You might be able to do this while I'm trying to get this up. There's been a lot of questions about masks and kids needing to see, you know, your face, things like that. Are there recommendations that you have? And I hate to say guidelines because that's the, you know, flexibility is like the word of the day for our governor. But, you know, have you been getting a lot of questions about that? Are there masks that are clear, things like that, for people to get so that when we're doing speech and things like that, they can actually be seen a little bit better? And then I'll pull up these other ones.
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of questions around masks from a variety of different viewpoints. And this summer, there was quite a bit of face-to-face programming going on school, so it gave us an opportunity to do some piloting. There are masks that are available that are see-through so that kids can see your face. In talking with special ed administrators, they got mixed reviews. Some really found them to be beneficial. Some did not like them at all and found them to fog up. I was up in meeting with the North Country folks the other day, and they provided some examples of face shields that actually have a mask that comes under the shield. So you don't have to wear a mask under the shield, but it's cloth that comes under the shield, which is another option. They tend to be very expensive. They're about $80 a unit. So we're finding that there's a lot of questions being raised around masks. There's also questions around the policies being developed by school boards, and we've notified the School Boards Association to make them aware. And that for districts that are adopting mandatory masks for kids and staff, we fully support that and want to protect everyone. We are seeing physicians who are writing exemptions for kids with disabilities who cannot tolerate masks, and coming up with some questions around whether or not policy can dictate that kids need to be isolated from their peers if they are not wearing a mask, and whether or not that is discrimination. Again, I don't have the answers. We're bringing these questions forward to our professional organizations and to our attorneys, because we recognize that we need to protect all kids and all staff. And if we have a small group of kids who aren't wearing masks, this is all new to us, and how do we handle it? So it's on the radar. We don't have the answers, but those challenges are coming forward for us. And we've also talked to a few pediatricians, and they have differing opinions. So they are not all on the same page either on the topic of masks. So I don't have an answer. I can just tell you where we've been going with that topic.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a learning curve for a lot. Unfortunately, it's going to be a learning curve, which I think is, I don't know. So some we got in before the call tonight. We've received no directives as to how to deliver services, hold meetings, etc., despite our school chairperson emailing the director for support and guidance. What would you recommend? Like, what would the next step be if they're not getting anything from their director?
Well, I appreciate you sending me that question. It raised a few questions for me.
Oh, can I just tell everybody, if you sent me a question, I didn't send names into Jane. Just so she knows, I only sent the questions in as general questions. So just so everybody knows.
So, I read the question, and it mentioned a school chairperson, and I wondered if that's a teacher or if that's an administrator. These are really difficult times for all of us, and we've got to work together to problem solve. And so I'm wondering if this chairperson has, shared that communication with the district administrator, with their principal, to say, we really need some help, we really need some direction, and kind of document that you've asked for the help. The other thing I noticed in the question is that the request for assistance was really broad. I can't remember what the topics were. It was advice on holding meetings and delivering services. My advice is, when you're asking for assistance, be really specific in what it is that you need help with, and document that, and start at the building level for any supports that you can gather, so as you can move up the chain of command to ask for more assistance, but be really specific. So when I read that, I was like, hold meetings. Does that mean remote meetings? Does it mean meetings in school? Does it mean meetings with general ed teachers? Being very specific in their requests. I think for the most part, special ed administrators are more than happy to support and provide professional learning for special ed teachers. But it's helpful to be very specific and know exactly what it is that you need the assistance with.
If a parent is unable to attend a meeting during the 30-day window of IEP meetings as mandated by the governor, what happens? So does the team meet anyway and make changes without the parent's input? What if a special educator cannot feasibly schedule all the meetings necessary within the 30-day window? What happens then? And I think this is very real, just because we are starting to go back and things are, moving.
Right. And this has become a real issue in terms of the, realistic expectation. Can you really actually, let's take Manchester, for example, can you actually really hold that amount of meetings in 30 days? You can't. You can't do it in a meaningful and authentic way. So number one, I think there's going to be some flexibility around the 30 days. We've already gotten verbal advice that it's going to be moved to November. So there may be some flexibility there. We've written to the governor and commissioner to get some clarification on that. I would advise not to hold meetings without parents. We've been told that yes, if you can't make that determination, hold the meeting remotely or over the phone and have the parent agree that at this point, we don't have enough information to make a viable decision. Let's reschedule for later. That way you've documented that you've held the meeting and you can't at this point in time determine whether or not the kid has made progress or whether or not they've lost learning. Just because you need to get them settled, you need to get them to know their new teachers, their new team, all of those kinds of things. So I think you're going to have some flexibility around that, and hopefully your special ed leaders in your district will provide some guidance around that in the very near future.
And so the biggest thing that I'm getting from this is just document everything. I mean, no matter what, keep documenting. Okay. The thoughts on a program. My school has been told to pilot Edmentum's exact path for documenting progress. Do you know what that is, or do you have a thought or recommendation for?
I saw that question, and that is not a program that I am familiar with.
Okay.
That might be something you could put out to your listserv to see if others are using it.
Yeah.
But it's not something that I'm familiar with.
Okay. And along with that, it says, can you discuss rollout of New Hampshire CEIS Connect Easy IEP platform to be shared with the parent?
Is this the electronic Easy IEP that folks are, yeah. That's going to be district dependent. Some districts have bought into that or signed on to that, and some have not. And there's been a lot of glitches in the program and the rollout of that. It was a really rocky start with very little guidance, support, or training on the part of the
Okay. Oh, I lost you there for a minute. Are you there?
Yep, can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, I got you now.
Okay, sorry. So this has gotten off to a real very little guidance or support from the Department of Ed. And so I would say look to your district administrator to see where your SAU or your school district is at, because there's been a lot of questions raised around that. And I'm not the boots on the ground, I'm not the practitioner that could give you any real solid, helpful hints on how to best proceed.
So I think, so there's two questions on here. I'm going to try and combine the two. One came to me private and one's to everyone. And I think this is going to affect a lot of people. So we're still remote. I know in Concord and some other districts. How are kids with IEPs going to receive their services? Because it still hasn't been said yet. And kind of tagging on to that, if the meetings are held remote, the teachers at home with family or children, or the parents home with others, what protections do they have in place regarding privacy? Because I think a lot's going to, be told to do remote. If we're full remote, let's try and do this remote. But what are the protections with privacy? And, are there protections for a teacher working one-on-one with a child over a Zoom meeting or something like that, as opposed to having a small group for instruction?
So when you're talking about privacy, I just want to make sure I understand the question correctly. Privacy in relation to the family being served or the teacher's privacy?
I'm reading this as the teacher or educator's privacy. But I think it could be, the family's privacy as well. We know that there's so much with internet, and I'm thinking of like the code of conduct that we have to follow. That's got to change if we're working on, remote learning as well, because there's too many problems with the way the code of conduct is written and privacy in general.
So I would say I'm going to refer you to your district administration. They should have developed some policies around that. I've seen some school districts who do not allow at least paraprofessionals providing administrator who's either there or dropping in regularly. Hopefully, school districts are putting together some guidance and policies around that issue relative to privacy and protecting both the educator and the family. So I would refer you back to your district administrators to make sure there are some processes in place, and it's going to look different depending upon the models that you're using and district policy and what the administration has agreed to.
Along with that, anything you do for that is that you should be documenting it. So have those discussions through email, just so that everything's documented and you have it in writing. There was a couple questions about the mandate from the governor and the evaluation. Are there specific tests that need to be recommended? What are the assessments that he's really asking? You know, this when it came out in March, I think some people were, I know a lot of educators were still getting through everything they were working on at the time. So looking ahead wasn't what, you know, they were focused on at the moment. Now, all of a sudden it's becoming real. Are there certain ones that, you know, they should be recommending? Is it specific? Is it open? Things like that.
We've been advised by the Department of Ed that these are open decisions based on what the IEP team recommends. So, you know, based on the kid's disability, what kinds of, you know, if it's a kid with lots of social and emotional challenges, you're probably going to focus more on that. You're also going to want to get a read on their, you know, academic progress, but the tools that you use are certainly left up to the IEP team and the expertise of the educators who know the kid and know the types of assessments that are going to be most appropriate for that kid. Keeping in mind that we've also been advised that the IEP teams need to be appropriately composed. So that includes the general education teacher in the conversation. And we've raised the concern that coming into this, teachers who have been assigned a student won't know them. And so we're not only going to have to engage the existing teacher, but most likely the teacher that had the student in March and throughout remote learning. So yet another resource challenge in order to do this kind of assessment in an authentic and genuine way.
Yeah. So that kind of goes along. Someone said, aren't we required to do statewide testing in October anyway? Yeah, but the statewide testing in October is just like the spring test. And my understanding is this is separate. And I could be wrong, Jane, but I think the statewide test that the commissioner is pushing is separate from the executive order. So the statewide testing in October, the commissioner thought it would be a good idea to only test grades 3 through 8 and grade 11 for the SATs. Instead of actually assessing where kids are at and actually getting good information. It's basically in the spring when we were the last state to waive state testing, it's because the commissioner said he wanted to get the biggest bang for his buck and make sure that we were getting everything we could in New Hampshire before he gave up our state testing. Now, my personal opinion, and you guys know I'm very frank with this group, my personal opinion is that he had a deal going that if we waived testing in the spring, that we would still do testing in the fall. There is absolutely no legitimate, sane, reason to do a fall statewide assessment on grades 3 through 8 when you're trying to find out where everybody's at and what they might have missed. They only miss things because we have them set at a certain level. I mean, I keep hearing, you know, the kids are going to be behind. What are they going to be behind? They're going to be behind the level that we think they should be at. But what is that? I mean, honestly, if we think about it, we've had to design education this entire last year and this year. Society is not keeping up with us, right? They're not keeping up with the fact that maybe businesses need to redesign the way they think, because a lot of parents still think we need to go back to school so they can have free daycare. We know that's not true, but there's still parents out there that think that. So anyway, I digress. But the fall assessment isn't a true assessment in my mind. it's something I think the commissioner had a little deal going with, and that's the only reason we're doing it. Because if we were going to do a true assessment, let the educators and the administration come up with that. Let that come up with formative assessments, or summative ones, so that we can actually get a handle on where the kids are at. But that would make sense, and that would be from someone who's actually been in a classroom, which our commissioner hasn't. So going back to some of these. Okay, where do we go here? Our parent, okay, I'm not sure what this is, so I'm gonna let Jane answer this. What about the DLM, alternative testing for students with ID?
So we've been advised that all of the requirements for assessing students with disabilities still hold true. So DLM is a part of that, and we've been informed, and the same holds true for the assessments for early learning. Some of you may be involved with some of the early learning preschool assessments. We've been told that those kinds of things still need to happen. We've been given no guidance on how you would do that remotely. So there have been there's been no relaxation in the rules and regulations for special education at the federal or state levels. Unfortunately, we're still held to all of the same expectations that we would be held to if we were face-to-face in school. We have, as an association and as professional organizations, have been having ongoing conversations with our policymakers at the federal level as well as at the state level, and we have made no progress in trying to have any flexibility in regards to modifying any compliance requirements.
Because again, Betsy DeVos, why would she want to do that? Are parent permission to conduct an educational evaluation required? That would add a level of difficulty to the timeline.
Could you repeat that one?
It said, are parent permission to conduct an educational evaluation required? That would add a level of difficulty to the timeline.
Yes, you need parental permission to conduct any evaluations, and you're absolutely right that that's part of our concern. That too adds to the challenge of trying to meet the expectations.
So it's interesting, Paula, you just wrote, I wonder what the fallout's going to be from that fall assessment at the state level. What's going to happen is the results are going to come out. It's going to make New Hampshire look extremely bad because they only tested certain grades. They didn't test all of them. And then the Edo Blue privatization is going to start, because all of a sudden, how bad does this look without knowing the whole story? That's my gut telling me that, and I hate that that's what I'm thinking, but I can't think anything else, because the commissioner has given us no other, reason to think that he truly has the best interests of the kids in mind. So, they're going to get published. We're still fighting with him about that the assessments are awful. Okay, my question about testing is more about the eligibility testing that we need to complete that's due. I put off 5 students in the spring. What will be available for us for online versions? I know that our student services coordinator is looking at the online available WISC, but is there going to be funding for online versions? Is this something available through COVID funds?
That's something that you would have to speak to your district administrator about. It's been very foggy in terms of the actual dollar amounts coming to school districts when it comes to CARES Act monies. And our policymakers are actually, I think, going to bring forward some questions to the commissioner and the governor, asking them to clearly delineate what has been and is available to our school districts. In regards to electronic administration of tests, again, this is New Hampshire, and every district has differing opinions. There are lots of questions being raised about the validity of electronic assessments and whether or not they were actually normed to be administrated remotely. This happened really quickly, this pandemic. We weren't prepared. And I think our school psychologists, if you talk to your school psychologist, the School Psychologists Association has put out a position paper on their thoughts regarding electronic assessments. And truly, every single district is approaching it differently. And so you're going to have to work with your district leaders on whether or not they're moving forward with electronic assessments, and would caution us to remember that formal evaluations differ from your informal assessments that can be done remotely. You can review a student's records. You can interview parents. There are things you can do remotely. And I am certainly no expert in terms of assessments, but our school psychologists are. And many of your special ed administrators have a very strong background there. So would encourage you to kind of scratch at that with your leaders in your district as to where they're at and how that's going to be happening.
I'm a related service provider in a district that's going 100% in person. Parents have an option for remote. 20% of my caseload will still be through Zoom. Students will be in cohorts by grade level. I'm expected to either do push-in services or see students by their grade level cohort. The students may end up in the same therapy group with different IEP goals. Will all these IEPs need to be amended? Many of these students have pull-out services in their IEP because this is how they learn best due to the nature and severity of their disability.
Unfortunately, I don't have a specific answer to that. We actually I met with several special ed attorneys today, specifically around amending IEPs. And again, there are differing opinions on that. And I think every district has a different attorney, and would encourage you in terms of amending IEPs to continue to have conversations with your district administrators. In terms of implementing e-therapies or remote therapies in small groups, I think we as special educators and related service folks, that's our expertise. We're able to differentiate, we're able to create unique ways to reach kids in these most difficult times. And while it might not be the absolute best in what you could accomplish face-to-face, many districts are giving parents decisions, and we recognize the importance of that. So we have to do the best we can to differentiate the way in which we deliver things. And it's not easy. And I would encourage you also to rely on some of your colleagues, if you can gather in your district and share ideas and brainstorm or do it regionally. There are actually a lot of good things going on. And if we can use those to learn from one another, I would encourage that whenever we can. So I think I got most of that question.
So Nancy's asking about the equity issue on special ed teachers, everything they're being asked to do, educators being able to request to be from home based on the principal's approval, everything like that. Nancy, that would be a question for Megan, I think, and make sure that, we're looking, if we're bringing up the contractual issues and the equity, I would go to the UD and check in with them on that.
And I would agree, Megan, I would agree that that's something that's in your ballpark. And I have to say, special ed administrators are aware of that.
Yeah.
And they know, and they are going to work hard on your behalf.
This one's interesting. I teach, excuse me, alternative classes. How am I going to meet these IEP goals if I'm testing all the time and holding meetings? I have over 30 plus students on my caseload, plus teach 4 separate classes. I mean, these are things that I know the commissioner doesn't know about. You know, I know the governor doesn't understand what's truly going on in the schools. I don't know. I don't even know what to say to that.
Well, it's part of the challenge that we have brought forward to the Department of Education and our policymakers, and that before decisions are made, it's vitally important to get the feedback from the field. These are the boots on the ground, they're the experts, and we are continually facing decisions that are just placed before us without any feedback. And Megan, we were in a meeting today with our policymakers, and that's what we said. You know, we would welcome the opportunity to be a part of the conversation before these kinds of decisions are made, because people don't know what it's like to be living in your shoes. And as leaders, we're here to represent you, but we need to have that door open for us to have the conversation. So in our letter to the governor, we address that. You know, kids come first, you know, testing comes second, kids and families come first, and that's our priority. And we just cannot, in the first 30 days, realistically accomplish that in a meaningful way. You know, I think we could in a non-meaningful way, but why?
Why would we do that? I mean,
what
that's right. And that's not anything anyone on this group ever would want to do. So I think, so we throw around a lot of terms all the time. Something interesting though, I think, Jane, that did come out of that conversation was, I think it was Senator Khan who actually said, you know, I'm really glad we're having these meetings because you have reframed how I think about a lot of this and reframe the message that we need to be getting out about educators. So, you know, we were on it with 3 legislators today, and I think they are all doing the best for students at this point and for educators, listening to all the groups that were there. So that was really good to hear. But we throw around terms and everything. Jane, could you just touch on the guidelines that are used to determine the criteria for compensatory education? Are they federal, state, local? I mean, we talk about it all the time, but just so everyone's on the same page with it, what is it and what?
That is the challenge. Nobody's on the same page. So, you know, it typically in a normal school year, compensatory education results because of a complaint that has been brought before a school district that they have not provided a free and appropriate education of faith. And so the question during remote learning is, what is faith? All of our kids are in remote learning. All of our kids were experiencing modified schedules, accommodating curriculum. And so all kids did not get what they would have gotten in a normal situation. And so we are in conversations with the Department of Education on how we define compensatory education. Our attorneys have a very different perception than the department does, and our advocacy groups. Our advocacy groups are looking at compensatory education as counting hours. So if a student was supposed to get 5 hours of speech and language pathology during remote learning and they only got 3.5, then the school district owes them X amount of hours. Our view from a legal aspect is that it's not about counting hours, it's about lost learning. So as special educators, I'm sure your leaders have told you the importance of documenting progress, student progress, so that when you have conversations with parents, you can say, Johnny has really progressed on this IEP goal. There hasn't been any regression. He didn't get the 5 hours, however, he really progressed. We recognize fully that there are going to be some kids that we truly owe compensatory education for. So it's all going to be around documenting and having the data to present to IEP teams around lost learning and kids progressing. So I'm not sure if that clarifies, but we are in a bit of a challenge with our advocacy groups and our Department of Ed in terms of coming to a common understanding around what compensatory education is.
Okay, there's one that I just lost, and I'm just trying to find it real quick. Do we have any guidelines or protections for itinerant related services providers?
So is it itinerant? Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Guidelines for itinerant. So can someone define what itinerant means? Is it like
Catherine wrote it. Where's Brinley's upset about all this too. Catherine, if we can unmute you.
I see it, moving between buildings. So guidance, I mean, again, that's going to come down to your district and having some clear policies and consistency among buildings. If you're a district employee traveling, you know, I'm just going to say a speech language pathologist who's a district employee traveling between buildings, and some of our SAUs are really big and very diverse. Hopefully there's some consistency in terms of expectations and practices from building to building so that there's no confusion. On the other hand, you may have questions come up with contracted service providers. So if you're contracting with an organization around speech language pathology or school psychology, something to ask your school leaders about in terms of expectations for them as they either provide remote learning or do face-to-face services in your school settings.
So this didn't come up, but I do have a question on, I just literally just thought of this. VLAX is full, and VLAX is a public charter school. What do you think, Jane, this is going to do to, I mean, what is going to be the responsibility of, I guess, a sending district if, you know, somebody sends their kid to a VLAX class for science and social studies, and their IEP requires, you know, I don't know, something that they need services for? Is that, I mean, how is that going to work, do you think? Has this come up? Is this even, am I
No one
making
at the department, no one at the Department of Ed has addressed this. That was a question actually that I brought to our attorneys today. It most likely is going to be an unintended consequence and an expense to school districts, because we all know that in charter schools, the local school district from which the student resides is responsible for the provision and payment of those services. So with the expansion of VLAX to K, with, you know, including K through 3, there was no thought given to special education, and unfortunately that's typical without like talking to the field. You know, we would have been happy to put up some red flags to say, hey, let's brainstorm around this, but to our knowledge right now that has not been addressed, and again we put that on the plate of our attorneys to give us some guidance.
Okay, I just literally, when I was reading all the, you know, articles the past day or so on how VLAX is full, and, you know, the commissioner's putting it back on schools now, saying you shouldn't have sent everybody to VLAX, so it's the school's fault for putting it out there. But anyway, 2 questions. Has there been any discussion, Jane, that you've been involved with about the alternative programming, places like Crotchet Mountain closing? Has there been any discussion on that and how it's going to be? I mean, it's not our job, I don't think, to resolve it in a sense, but have we, you know, done any of that?
We haven't, as an association, had any conversations around that, but we recognize that those are some of our most significant kids, and we feel for the families who are seeking placements. And it's really the role of the IEP teams to be exploring what kinds of alternative placements can happen for those kids. And there aren't a lot of them in New Hampshire. I would imagine that many IEP teams are seeking and looking at out-of-state placements.
Wow.
So yeah, we haven't had conversations, but that's all a decision at the local level based on the needs of the kids.
Okay. What if students and parents refuse services? Do we owe them comp services? And then a follow-up to it was that we had a large number of students and parents who did not respond to service requests or meetings, even when multiple providers attempted to reach them through a variety of ways. So do we owe them anything if we've done our job and tried every possible way to get a hold of them, but they're refusing services?
You know, I'm just going to make a general statement here. If you've documented things and that, you know, you've got that paper trail, most likely you're not going to be responsible. But it's really the documentation piece is going to be critical in those conversations.
Yeah. So this is interesting. Someone else wrote that their daughter was on VLAX, asked for accommodations, was told that it was already accommodated because there's always extra time. That's not an accommodation for everyone though. I mean, that's not the only accommodation that kids might need. But if that's what they're being told, that really scares me that that's their answer to it. Wow. So, yeah, we're getting close to 8:30. And so I'll give a few more minutes on these questions. You know, keep them coming in because I will forward them over to Jane and we can see, you know, what's going on. I think this is going to be, it's going to be awful. I don't know what else to say. I can't be optimistic at this point, and I feel for all the special ed teachers out there, all the paras, everybody that works with them. I especially feel for Jane and Jerry right now because I think they're gonna be really busy this year. There's so many unintended consequences that the commissioner didn't think through and hasn't thought through, and you know, the governor hasn't thought through a lot of these. So I mean, we're gonna do the best we can. We always do. You always do. You know, we will get through it, I guess is the best I can say. You know that we're here to listen. We do have places to go. We don't always have an answer, unfortunately, but at least we know that the issues are being brought up and the topics being discussed because it has to be. So again, we don't always have an answer, but at least we know where we can go to at least bounce things off and bring things up if we need to. So keep the questions coming in, bring them to your UniServe director, bring them to me. I'll get them over to Jane. We can talk about them. We do have allies in the state, guys. We do have groups that want to work with us. Jane's Association is one of them. And, you know, I can't thank her enough for being behind us in all this. Just to throw some more fuel on the fire, on Thursday is the next State Board of Education meeting, and they're going to adopt Learn Everywhere, basically. Because legislation failed to get rid of it last year. So that's going to go through, I think, on Thursday, which is going to add a whole nother level of, you know, fun and chaos to our lives. Because why not? This is like, you know, this is a fun time, isn't it? No. I see one like this and one like this. But again, you know, I do want to thank you for everything you're doing. We can't thank you enough. Committees, we need help. Remember, we are 17,000 strong for NEA New Hampshire. We're the largest group. And it's, you know, we started out with maybe 20 people on these Tuttle Talks. We are getting at least about 100 now each week, which is awesome because it means you guys are listening. You're bringing it back to hopefully your members. You're letting them know what's going on, hopefully letting them know that we are here to listen and to talk about these things. As Keith just said, yes, we are headed into a hot mess, a very hot mess, and it's going to get hotter because, you know, with the districts changing literally overnight of remote to hybrid to this to that, you know, we're here to help. Jane's group is here to help. The school board's group is even here to help, guys. They're working with us on this, and the administrators and everything and the principals. So we will be here to help in whatever capacity we can. So yeah. I don't know. I hope everybody stays cool tonight. Like I said, we will be back next week. I think we're gonna have Portsmouth board meeting tonight. Ooh, I know Pembroke had theirs, Concord has theirs. This is going to be a fun couple weeks, which I love that they're all meeting remotely. I think that's hilarious. They're all meeting remotely, but they want us to go back in person. Like, really? Oh, and let me just add in about the governor's executive order today. Someone asked about it earlier. The governor did come out with an executive order that groups of 100 plus are mandated wearing masks, which I think is hilarious after the NASCAR weekend came through. Then let's do the 100 plus masks before, before bike. But anyway, a reporter did ask him, that did not, they did not include schools in that. So he's considering groups less than 100 in the classrooms, I think. So he said unless it was a scheduled event like an assembly in a school, and honestly, I don't think anyone's stupid enough to pull an assembly together right now in a school, but if they were, then they would have to wear masks. I don't know that he's thinking about the high schools and the elementary schools and middle schools that have hundreds of kids walking around the building at the same time. Apparently that's not a scheduled event, even though it's a schedule. So that doesn't matter, but according to the governor, schools are not included in that. So it's important to mask up if you go to a wedding. Not important to mask up if you're going to go get an education, to mandate it. Jane?
Yeah, I just want to add, the Special Ed Administrators Association recognized the very difficult position that our special educators are in, and as well as our general educators who are equally responsible for our kids' disabilities. And these times are so tough. I would encourage all of us to take a deep breath and work together. Every day something comes up to face us. We spent an entire day as part of our conference just talking about the importance of wellness of our leaders and our staff. And, no matter how tough it gets, you guys are the boots on the ground, and we're here to support you, and we'll get through it. There's going to be a lot of hurdles, but please know that the special ed administrators are here for support, guidance. We're here for our kids and our families, and we're gonna pull through it eventually.
Yeah. And you just brought up an important thing. I mean, I say it almost every week, but you have to take care of yourselves first. If you don't take care of yourselves, you're no good to anybody. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but you're not. I started CrossFit again. So soon I will be able to bench press the commissioner. And I'm very excited about this. I think I can probably almost bench press his weight right now. So I'm pretty psyched about that. I would do that for like a fundraiser. I would do that to raise money for PAC to get pro-education candidates in the House and Senate and the governor's office. I think that'd be kind of funny. But that's what I started. And when people say, I might throw them after too, just because I might have to get them off. But, people say, can we have a meeting at like 8 or whatever? Nope. I have CrossFit 7:30 to 8:30 every day. I don't get home until 9. And then I need half an hour to wipe down and stuff. So I finally say I can't do this anymore. Only 100 for Betsy DeVos? Come on. But I just think, we gotta find something that relaxes you. For me, this is something that's worked for me, because you can grunt and groan and scream and no one judges, and it's great. So yeah, find something, make sure, entire other yacht, make sure that you have something for yourself. There you go, Nancy, that one I like. And wait, I was gonna say something else, I can't remember. I don't know, but find something that works for you. Take the time. School is gonna be starting for a lot of people soon. We are gonna get through this. Like Jane said, we have enough allies in the state. We need to be getting this out into the public. I have a no holds barred approach at this point to Frank Edelblue and to Chris Sununu. They haven't done anything that's proven anything to me that they should be where they are. So elections matter. In November, NEA New Hampshire has recommended Andrew Valinsky as our pick for governor, and I think he's going to be on next week. I think that's what I'm coming out of vacation for. So we will have him on, and we'll have question and answer. You know, Dan's a great person as well, but Andy, just his education, you know, what he's been doing for education for 30 years is just wow. So I think we're trying to get him on next week, just so you know. And yeah, go find something that makes you happy. And I thank you all for everything you're